What's going on, everybody? My name is Sean Stevenson, and I want to welcome you all to the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show, Week 4, and it is time for some Cleveland Browns football. There's nothing better than starting your Sunday off with some Browns football. And the Browns are currently 2-1 and have an opportunity to go 3-1. And this is going to be a huge matchup for the Browns this week. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys are a very talented team. They have a very explosive offense, and we're expecting the Cleveland Browns to do big things this season. So let's go ahead and hop straight into it. Again, my name is Sean Stevenson. I am the host of the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show, which is sponsored by Sports Illustrated Browns Digest. I am a contributing writer over at Sports Illustrated Browns Digest, along with Pete Smith and Brandon Little. And basically, each week, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is about giving you all the information you need in order to know what's going on with this matchup, what are the important things to know, the depth chart, injury report, all those things. We do it on a weekly basis. Also, of course, we have wonderful recipes that you can try out each week for your tailgate, whether it be with your friends. Obviously, there are people inside the stadiums as well. This will actually be more of a packed stadium compared to normal pandemic standards, with them having fans in Dallas at AT&T Stadium. And again, the socials are in the top left and right-hand corners. You can follow me. Again, Sean Stevenson. The @ is SHWN Stevenson, essentially my first name without the A in Sean. Let's go ahead and hop straight into it. Again, Week 4 matchup. The Cowboys hosting the Browns at AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas. The last time these two teams met up, the Cowboys won 35-10. That was all the way back in Week 9 of 2016. Obviously, we all know how dramatic and poor of a season that was for the Cleveland Browns, going 1-15. Obviously, in the first year of the whole Hugh Jackson era, but things have changed. New head coach Kevin Stefanski has came in, turned things around. The Browns are 2-1. Obviously with a record over 500 for the first time since 2014, and they're definitely looking to build upon that. Obviously 2 wins in a row is huge for the Browns, and they want to carry over some of that momentum. And then comes the Dallas Cowboys, a team that's a little bit more on the sporadic side. You're not really sure what you're going to get from them. Obviously, the defense has struggled so far this season. There has been some injuries and just different things that the team has had to deal with. And obviously, there will be some changes, along the offensive line for the Dallas Cowboys. But again, that offense is explosive. You look at Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and then their first-round pick, CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, there's a lot of talent on this Cowboys offense, and they can put up points quickly. And that's definitely going to be something to watch with the Browns defense to see if they can maintain their offense as much as possible to keep the Browns in the game. Now, just looking at the team stats for the Browns, they are 4th in the league with 511 yards, and they're 5th in the league in attempts with 99. Now, obviously, the ground game, the run game is the most important thing for this Browns offense and that outside zone scheme. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, that two-headed monster that has been there day in and day out for this season, expect him to pound the ball. Obviously, there's still some questions regarding the health of Kareem Hunt for this game. He is questionable heading into the game with a groin injury, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But another big question about this is the team's passing as well. Obviously, the passing attack hasn't been, what we expected to be with Baker Mayfield coming in his 3rd season, but he's not making mistakes, at least for the most part. Last week, again, went 16 for 23, threw for 2 touchdowns, no interceptions last week against the Washington football team. And obviously, you want to see him to build upon his success. He's been having a high QBR for essentially the last 2 weeks of the season. And we just want to see him build upon that, basically trusting his eyes, making sure that he reads the field and, taking those check downs. Those are really the biggest things, finding the open receiver and just keep drives moving. That's really what Kevin Stefanski's want in this offense, is to build drives, rely on that run game, and obviously Baker Mayfield when the ball's in his hands to trust his eyes and to just let it rip. Now, looking at the defensive side of the ball, obviously there's some things that need to change on the back end of the defense. Currently, they're the 20th ranked secondary, allowing 761 passing yards. But on the flip side, they're also one of the top teams, top 5 in terms of rush defense. They're only averaging 3 yards per carry whenever opposite teams run the ball. And obviously, that's going to be huge facing up against Ezekiel Elliott, who's definitely a top 3 running back in the NFL. So obviously, that Browns defense will help, limit him. And he has been having, that outlandish season where he's running for 100 yards every single game. He's actually yet to break that mark, but obviously, he's still a threat. and they're going to pound the ball with him, especially if they don't get down early. Now, looking at the Dallas Cowboys, who come into this game at 1-2, obviously they came in really closely in a situation to where they almost could be 0-3 this season. And obviously that's huge, seeing by the fact that they haven't really proven to be that top-notch team in the NFC East, or, really even being a playoff contender in the NFC East. Now, you look at the Atlanta Falcons and the fact that they botched that whole onside kick situation, which gave the Cowboys their only win of the season thus far. And obviously that was a home game, but they were really close to looking at 0-3, and obviously they're trying to avoid going 1-3 with a loss this week. Now, you look at their offense, they're the number one offense. Obviously, that's behind the arm of Dak Prescott. He's leading the league in passing yards with over 1,100 yards. And obviously, that three-headed monster at receiver with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb is something the Browns defense is definitely going to have to figure out a way how to limit. Obviously, passing attacks for the Browns have been quite dangerous. You look at what the Baltimore Ravens did with Mark Andrews and Willie Snead up the middle of the field. Obviously, Joe Burrow put up a lot of yardage. Dwayne Haskins pretty much was the first decent performance that we've seen out of the secondary. He obviously showed some struggles of staring down receivers, and the secondary was able to take advantage of that, forcing him to 3 interceptions. But again, you're going up against a different beast. Dak Prescott has pretty much built upon the play that he had last season, throwing the ball with some success, obviously playing on the franchise tag. So he's looking to get that contract and to make some money. So he's going to be looking to play at the highest level possible. And then you look at the rushing. Now, they're only 23rd in the league right now with just barely over 300 yards rushing, but obviously the team has got down quickly and they've been forced to throw the ball. You look at the Seahawks and you look at the Atlanta Falcons 2 weeks ago. Obviously, Dak Prescott has been throwing the ball a lot, and they're probably going to continue to do so when they're down late in games. And with the Browns type of offense, if they can actually get up early and continue to pound the ball, you can expect Dak Prescott to continue to throw the ball a lot. But obviously, that all dictates by how the Browns play early in this matchup. Now, going over to the injury report, the Browns, again, have been struggling with injuries throughout the practice week. Some consistent names that you've been seeing week in and week out on the injury report are starting to show up again this week. Obviously, cornerback Greedy Williams is again out with a shoulder injury. There's still positive news and optimism about him potentially returning soon, maybe next week or the following. Obviously, he's been a limited participant throughout practice, and there's no need to rush him back. You look at Terence Mitchell and how he has been performing so far this season. There's really no need to rush Greedy out there and ease him back into the game. Obviously, this is going to be a 16-game season, and you want, your future and your starter players to be as healthy as possible, obviously going late into the season and obviously to make that playoff push. Then Adrian Claiborne, he's also going to be out with a hip injury. He didn't practice at all this week. And then Tay Davis, the special teams player, he's going to be out as well with the elbow injury. Now, you look at these starters and these impact players that are going to be listed as questionable this week. Obviously, Joe Betonio has been dealing with a little bit of back issues this week during practice that limited him early in the week, but he's likely going to be in this game. Obviously, you have Nick Harris, who was out with an illness on Friday. He's likely to be back, if not listed as a game day inactive. He's going to be the backup center behind Tracy Treader, who's fully healthy, which is a good thing, not seeing him on the injury report. Then you look at some of the more big questionable ones. Kareem Hunt. Obviously, he's a big question mark heading into this game, and unless he makes the game day inactive list, which I don't see them doing, obviously, because you want to keep the Cowboys on their toes. But he's been dealing with the groin injury late in the week, which is never a good sign. But, obviously, we're hoping that he's healthy and he can help this team in the back end of the game in the third and fourth quarters where he gets to predominantly his run carries. Then you look at Jacob Phillips, who's been dealing with a knee injury. If you did see his Instagram post yesterday, he obviously showed that he will be playing this week. So that's something to monitor, how many snaps he gets this week and really just the health of that knee. Obviously, you don't want him on the field too much where you could risk him re-injuring that knee. And speaking of another linebacker with knee issues, Mack Wilson was not on the injury report this week, which is really huge. Obviously, he suffered that hyperextended knee back in training camp. So he's healthy. You can expect him to play some snaps after playing 6 last week. And then obviously on the defensive line in the secondary, you have Olivier Vernon, who's been dealing with the abdomen injury and who hasn't really been healthy for a majority of his time with the Browns. So obviously we're hoping that he can get back fully healthy and be that consistent edge player across from Myles Garrett that this defense obviously needs. And then Denzel Ward, again, suffering from that nagging groin injury. He didn't play in the second half against Washington. So obviously that's something that we want to monitor as well, because he'll likely be matched up against Amari Cooper this game. And obviously if Ward is not good to go, the Browns passing attack could take a big hit, and that could be problematic if Ward isn't healthy enough to cover Amari Cooper for majority of this game. Now, looking at the Dallas Cowboys, their injury report, obviously for them, they've been ravished by injury heading into this game, losing players to IR. They've already lost Leighton Vander Esch, Sean Lee. They just lost Chidobe Azawuzie, the cornerback. And then, of course, across the offensive line, they've been dealing with injuries to Tyron Smith. They've already lost La'el Collins and Cameron Irving to IR, short-term IR on injury reserve. So obviously, their key starters have been missing time. But again, it all comes up to the depth and coaching in this point. But in terms of just a relatively healthy week, they're only looking at 3 players as questionable who are likely going to play. You look at Trayvon Diggs, who was dealing with a shoulder and knee injury during practice this week. He's listed as questionable. He's their number 1 corner. He's likely going to go this week. And you look at DeMarcus Lawrence. Obviously, they gave him a big contract. He's been struggling with health this season so far. He's questionable with a knee injury. Again, they've been struggling on the defensive line, so it's most likely he's going to play this game because they need that production from that defensive line. And then also you look at Tyron Smith, who's been dealing with a neck injury this season. He's listed as questionable. He hasn't played for a few games this season already, so that's obviously something to look at in terms of his health. And with that tackle situation with them already missing La'el Collins and Cameron Irving, the edge play from Myles Garrett, Porter Gustin, Olivier Vernon is going to be huge for this matchup. Now, again, what would a Cleveland Browns tailgate show be without a tailgate recipe? Now, if you guys were here for week 1 of the tailgate, obviously we ran into some audio issues. So I just want to see if you guys haven't seen it live. This week's recipe is going to be buffalo chicken dip again. But again, this will be for the live stream for you guys to see it in its full capability. And again, this is the buffalo chicken dip for the tailgate recipe of the week. What's going on, Dog Pound? The tailgate recipe of the week is jalapeno bacon buffalo chicken dip, and it is delicious. When I say it's going to be the party of the party, it is great. It's savory, it's spicy, it's cheesy, and best of all, it's a dip. Who doesn't love dip? So let's dip out and show you how to cook this thing. Again, that is the tailgate recipe of the week, brought to you by Sports Illustrated Browns Digest. Let's hop straight into the depth chart for this week. So looking at the Cleveland Browns, obviously there's not too many changes on offense. Starting quarterback is still going to be Baker Mayfield, and he's backed up by Case Keenum. And then our running back position, you have Nick Chubb. Obviously, there's still some health concerns about Kareem Hunt, who's dealing with a groin injury, but he's likely to go this week, but probably on a limited basis. And then the third running back is going to be Dearness Johnson. Now, also on the flip side, the Browns have signed Dontrell Hilliard to their practice squad. He may be activated for this game. Obviously, again, the health of Kareem Hunt is the biggest question mark when it comes to that. But don't be surprised if you see Dearness Johnson get a little bit more work in third down passing situations. He does excel in terms of picking up pass protections in the backfield on passing downs. So you can feel confident in the situations that Nick Chubb is known to field, and passing situations that Dearness Johnson can excel in catching passes out of the backfield and in pass protection. And then obviously the fullback, Andy Janovich, he's currently the third rated fullback in the league right now with the overall offensive grade of a 69.0. Janovich, which really helps when we're in those power formations, that power I, strong, weak, close formations. You want him to continue to open up those lanes, which he's been doing relatively well. And obviously the vision of Nick Chubb is something that he will continue to benefit from, especially by the fact that Nick Chubb is a very patient runner, but he's also explosive through the hole. You look at Wyatt Teller, you look at Joe Betonio, and a lot of those pull blocks that they were having last week against the Washington football team. You want to see them continue with that success, having those lead blockers, and again, just opening up more lanes for Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt to run through. Now, looking at the receiver position, this is obviously a position group that we're expecting just a little bit more from. Obviously, this is a run-heavy offense, but you still want to see a little bit more from Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. Odell Beckham, obviously, a good player. He's been improving on his production. Obviously, didn't have the greatest game in week 1, had a deep touchdown on play action on a Thursday night against the Cincinnati Bengals, and then had some decent production, but obviously had big third down catches for the Browns against the Washington football team, especially at the start of that second half. And you look at Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry obviously hasn't had that big keynote game yet, but don't be surprised if this may be the opportunity against a weaker Dallas Cowboys secondary, especially their corners that still have some question marks surrounding them. So obviously Jarvis Landry, very short-handed receiver, obviously has been playing well when it comes to catching passes and keeping drives going, and we want to see him continue to build upon that success. And you look at the receiver 3, Kader Hodge. Kader Hodge is a player that a lot of fans question, wondering why Rashad Higgins hasn't been on the field yet, or been on the field much at all. Because Kader Hodge is actually the highest rated run blocking receiver on the Browns with the 66.3 grade, which is huge because obviously being a run heavy team, when he's in on those run downs, he can seal the edge against corners, and that helps give more lanes for the outside zone scheme that Stefanski likes to run. And then also he's shown, sure hands on play action passes. Obviously, when he's in the game, he doesn't tilt on what the Browns may do too much, rather it be a play action or actually running the ball, which definitely helps. And then, of course, you have Rashad Higgins and then Donovan Peoples-Jones at the receiver position. They obviously lost JoJo Natson last week, who was predominantly the punt and kick returner for the Browns. And they did have a few jet sweeps, but he tore his ACL, so he's going to be done for the season. So look for Peoples-Jones to potentially get some snaps this week. Now, looking at the tight end position, you have Austin Hooper, again, who has been performing relatively decently. Obviously, his production in terms of catching passes or receiving yards hasn't been the greatest, but he offers a lot in the run game, being a really good run blocker and, again, helping seal that edge. It's going to be a big matchup this week for the Browns tight ends and the edge players for the Cowboys. So, obviously, you want Austin Hooper to continue to build upon that success that he's had in run blocking. And then also you look at Harrison Bryant, who's been improving each week in his run blocking, which is very important when you're running a lot of 11 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field. That Harrison blocker continues to build upon his functional strength as a run blocker and being that inline tight end or as an H-back. But obviously last week he scored his first touchdown of the season, which is huge, obviously, for a rookie to get into the end zone, especially early on, can help with building that chemistry with Baker Mayfield. He's backed up by Steven Carlson. And then looking on the brighter side of things down the future, likely to get David Njoku back from IR after that big week that he had in week 1 on 17 snaps against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, looking at the offensive line for the Browns, this is a group that we want to continue to see improve. And they've been improving each week throughout the season, obviously building that chemistry, which is very, very important. Starting on the left side of that line, you look at Jedrick Wheels, the offensive rookie out of Alabama. He's been improving each week, especially in his pass block protection. He's currently graded at a 72.2 for all offensive tackles, which is really good. He's 45th of all tackles right now, but given the fact that there's typically 64 plus a swing tackle for each team, there's a bigger range of offensive tackles for him to be ranked. But again, he's improving at pass protection, which is huge, protecting Baker Mayfield's blind side. And we just want him to continue to grow in that role and get more and more comfortable as the season progresses. Now, looking at the offensive guards, you have Joel Betonio and Wyatt Teller. Obviously, Wyatt Teller on the right side of that line, he was the highest rated guard for a few weeks. Now he's down to the 3rd highest rated guard with an 87.5 grade. Obviously, he still has the highest run blocking grade of all offensive guards with an 88.8 run blocking grade. And then again, the Browns having 2 of the top 5 offensive guards is really important with Baker Mayfield. Obviously, with Mayfield being a shorter quarterback, you want to make sure that you have clean interior protection, and you're getting that with Joe Betonio and Wyatt Teller. Joe Betonio right now is currently ranked at an 84.5, which is for 5th highest for offensive guards with the 80.4 run blocking grade. So obviously the Browns interior has been grading relatively well in terms of run blocking, which is huge for this offense. Then you look at center J.C. Tretter, again, the 3rd highest rated center in the league with a 78.7 grade and a 78.9 pass blocking grade. Again, he's that captain of the line where he communicates and builds that chemistry from the center out, which is huge. And then obviously the connection that he has with Baker Mayfield is really important. And he's also been really good with helping seal blocks and helping the guards and tackles get to the second level in the run game. And then lastly, you have Jack Conklin, who's been improving each week as he's been getting healthier. Is currently the 20th ranked guard with a 76.0 grade and an improved 76.8 pass blocking grade. Obviously, his run blocking grade could improve just a little bit more. Obviously, he's been that run grading mauler right tackle after playing with the Tennessee Titans for, a few seasons. And we're just expecting him to continue to improve and get healthier and watch this offensive line grow. Now, switching over to the defensive side of the ball, obviously, the Browns defense needs to play better. That's huge right now, especially going against the Dallas Cowboys and this explosive offense. The Browns defense is going to be the thing that could really be the X factor for this whole matchup. You look at Myles Garrett, who's the 3rd highest edge defender in the NFL, who has the highest pass rushing grade with a 91.2. You expect him to continue to build upon his performances of getting to the quarterback, getting QB hits, and continue to get pressure. Obviously, the front 4 of this Browns defense is really important for them to get pressure as much as possible while also maintaining the running lanes for Dak Prescott. Now, Dak Prescott isn't a run-first quarterback, but he is mobile. So obviously in situations where he feels that there aren't things that are open down the field, he has no problems tucking the ball and getting a first down with his legs. He also had 3 rushing touchdowns over the last few weeks just from QB sneaks on the goal line. So that's definitely going to be huge that they're able to prevent those QB sneaks on the goal line, which could make the difference between a field goal and a touchdown. And then you look at Olivier Vernon, who has struggled with injuries this season. There's the abdomen injury. Last year, he dealt with the knee injury. He hasn't necessarily been healthy since joining the Browns, and we're hoping that he can get back to that point of being healthy. He's averaged around 6.5 sacks before joining the Browns. So can he get back to that point of providing that pass rushing productivity? It's still something that we're waiting to see. But on the same token, Porter Gustin, who has had the 2nd most snaps at the defensive end position, is a very athletic player who's been relatively healthy for the Browns. He's grading at a 60.5 at the edge position and is relatively decent in terms of pass rushing productivity and passing situations with a 64.6 pass rushing grade. Moving over to the interior, you look at Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi. Larry Ogunjobi, who was one of the higher rated defensive tackles in the league, he's now around 20th. But on the same token, he's still grading extremely high in run defense with the 86.5 run defensive grade. And we want to see him continue build upon that success, obviously, alongside Sheldon Richardson, who's the leader of that defensive line on the interior, continue to make plays. They've made some huge tackle for losses in the backfield against the running games of Washington and the Bengals. And the better they can play this week against Ezekiel Elliott and that run game will be huge. But on the same token, it does continue to put some pressure on the back end of that Browns defense. And then lastly, in the rotation for the interior, look at Jordan Elliott, who's been grading really well, especially in terms of his run defense. He has a 77.0 grade, which is for 16th highest of all interior defenders. Being that 3rd rotational defensive tackle is going to be huge for him to continue to build upon his rookie season and add more reps so that Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi are fresh throughout the game, and he's backed up by Vincent Taylor. Looking at the Browns linebacking core, they're getting back Mack Wilson this week, which is huge. He was dealing with that hyperextended knee injury. Not being on the injury report this week is big for him as he continues to just get healthier, and he'll definitely see increased snaps this week after only having 6 snaps last week. He's backed up by Malcolm Smith, who essentially those two should likely rotate throughout the game. Michael Smith has excelled in coverage thus far this season with a 73.1 coverage grade, and in situations that he's on the field, you could expect him to be covering tight ends or covering the curl flats or the outside zone of the defense. Then you look at B.J. Goodson. B.J. Goodson went into last week with some questions with his ability to cover tight ends in space or really just cover anybody in the middle of the field. He stepped up in terms of his coverage, which is huge because he was obviously struggling in that area, getting torched week 1 against Mark Andrews and the Baltimore Ravens. But we wanted to see him continue to build upon that success that he had last week. He did have an interception against Dwayne Haskins. So obviously, we're hoping that he can continue to improve in coverage because B.J. Goodson's ability to play in coverage is one of the bigger question marks for this defense, especially that linebacking core. He has struggled, but apparently he's been putting in extra work after practice, during practice, making sure he's taking extra coverage reps to essentially seal those leaks that the Browns secondary and linebacking core has had. And then lastly, look at Sione Takitaki and Jacob Phillips. Jacob Phillips was listed as questionable heading into this matchup, but again, he posted on his Instagram page that it's going to be his first game back, so you could probably expect him back at a limited snap basis. While looking at Sione Takitaki, he has graded well in run defense with a 71.8 run defensive grade, but he still is a liability in coverage with a 34.8 coverage grade. So obviously, in run situations, you can expect Sione Takitaki to be in the game on early downs, first and second down, but on third down, it gets a little bit more questionable of what he can provide. But again, he's been grading relatively well in run defense, and that's what you really expected for him being your strong side linebacker. Moving to the secondary, you look at Denzel Ward and Terence Mitchell, both who actually tied for 13th highest in terms of cornerback grades with a 70.2. You want to see Denzel Ward and Terence Mitchell to continue to play well on the outside. Again, the Dallas Cowboys are going to be running a lot of 11 personnel with those 3 receivers of Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb. And this is going to be a big matchup for the Browns secondary. And then you have at the nickelback Kevin Johnson, who's most likely going to be matched up with CeeDee Lamb in the slot. Kevin Johnson has been playing relatively well. He has a 72.2 grade in 37 snaps with a big 78.2 coverage grade. So obviously, when healthy, Kevin Johnson can, I don't want to necessarily say dominate, but he can play very strongly in the slot. Obviously, there's still some questions about him and playing on the outside, but in the slot, Kevin Johnson definitely excels, and that's going to be a big matchup on the interior. And he's going to be backed up by Tavierre Thomas and MJ Stewart. Tavierre Thomas had the most snaps in week 1 and week 2 as Kevin Johnson was still coming back from that lacerated liver, and he's healthy now. So you want to see Kevin Johnson continue to, build upon his chemistry as he gets more reps throughout the game. Now you look at the secondary with Carl Joseph and Ronnie Harrison at the strong safety position. Carl Joseph had that pick last week, returned it for a decent return, and then fumbled the ball. Luckily, it was recovered by Tavierre Thomas, again, a name that consistently comes up. Carl Joseph improved in coverage. He's been playing better in run defense as well, so we want to see him build upon that. And then obviously Andrew Sendejo, just slowly but surely trying to improve in coverage and run defense. He's currently sitting at a 53.5 coverage grade, and want to see him continue to improve because he's still been playing below average and is still the biggest question mark on the back end of that Browns secondary. He's backed up by Sheldrick Redwine and then Javante Mofat, who was promoted from the practice squad this week. Now, again, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is sponsored by Focus Clothing. Focus Clothing, which is more than a brand. You can follow them on social media at Focus Clothing, CLE. They provide daily motivation, and they're a Cleveland-based apparel company. You can go ahead and check them out at www.focusclothing.com/shop. I want to thank you guys again for joining me for the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. Again, the Browns will be heading to Dallas, or already in Dallas, for the Dallas Cowboys and Jerry World. Let's go ahead and get into the Dallas Cowboys and their depth chart. You look at quarterback, Prescott, again, the number one offense in the NFL right now, off the arm of Dak Prescott, who's thrown for over 450 yards in his last 2 outings, which is huge. So obviously they can throw the ball and launch the ball down the field, which is huge for picking up that many yards. He's backed up by former Cincinnati Bengal Andy Dalton. So in the situation that he does go down, obviously you don't want injuries to happen to anyone, but they do have a decent backup in Andy Dalton. And then lastly, their third quarterback, who's likely going to be inactive today, is going to be Ben DiNucci. Looking at the running back position, obviously you have the former Ohio State Buckeye Ezekiel Elliott with that new "Feed Me" tattoo, and he wants the ball. He got a new contract a couple years ago, and he's hoping to make the most of that this season, continuing to be the main focus of the Dallas Cowboys offense. But there's still questions regarding the Dallas Cowboys and their offensive line, so they haven't been running the ball as much, and it's a lot different in terms of the style of offense that they're running this season. Typically, when you think of the Cowboys, you think of them running 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field, heavy formations, and just pounding the ball behind that offensive line. But they're missing some players, and they're suffering from injury. So they've kind of changed to a more gun spread look, but we'll get into that a little bit later when we get into the team schemes. Ezekiel Elliott is backed up by Tony Pollard and then Rico Dowdle, who's more of a power back. Looking at the receivers, again, you have that 3-headed monster in Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb. And they're backed up by Cedric Wilson, Noah Brown, and Malik Turner. CeeDee Lamb, I believe, is really going to be the biggest X factor for this game because he has the ability to tear up a game, which all 3 of their receivers really do. With you look at Michael Gallup, who had over 100 yards last week. Jedrick Wilson, who essentially came out of nowhere and had a 100-yard, 2-touchdown game last week. Amari Cooper obviously has a threat to always go for 100 yards, and he's going to get a lot of targets. But CeeDee Lamb in the slot, he's one of the better route runners of this rookie draft class for wide receivers. He obviously can catch the ball. He gets really good separation in the slot. So his matchup against Kevin Johnson is going to be one of the bigger ones for this game. And currently CeeDee Lamb has a 66.1 offensive grade with a 69.2 offensive grade, which is above average in terms of his grade according to Pro Football Focus. But again, he just has that ability and that route running nuance that can help him get separation on the interior and the intermediate parts of the field. And that's obviously been an area that the Browns defense has struggled with in terms of covering receivers and tight ends in the middle and intermediate parts of the field. Looking at their tight end position, Blake Jarwin is out for the rest of the year with a torn ACL. He's replaced by Dalton Schultz, who's actually played relatively decent in his snaps with Jarwin now out for the season. He's backed up by Blake Bell and Sean Makion, the rookie out of Michigan. Then you look at the offensive line for the Dallas Cowboys. This area of the offense really has the biggest question marks because you really don't know the health of Tyron Smith. And then obviously they're already missing some right tackles. Tyron Smith currently right now is graded as the 54th highest guard with a 62.3 grade, but still excels in pass protection with the 77.4 pass blocking grade. And then you look at his backup, Brandon Knight, who also plays in the interior for the right guard position. He's been playing majority of snaps at that left tackle spot with Tyron Smith dealing with injury this season, and he's graded at 63.1 for the 50th highest rated tackle. Then you slide over to the interior, you look at Connor Williams from Texas with a 55.0 grade for 53rd for guards. He's graded a little bit better in pass protection than run protection with the 62.7 pass blocking grade. Then you look at Joe Looney at center with a 62.5, which is for 22nd highest of all centers, and he's a little bit more excelling at run blocking compared to pass protection with the 65.5 run blocking grade according to Pro Football Focus. Now you look at the All-Pro, Zack Martin. There were some questions going to Mike McCarthy this week about if they will put Zack Martin at right tackle with the struggles of Terence still at that position. But he said that Zack Martin is going to stay at that right guard position as they still try to figure out the best lineup for that offensive line. Zack Martin's currently graded as the 15th highest offensive guard this season with a 74.2 grade. Again, excels really well in the run blocking with a 76.8 run blocking grade. And then you look at Terence Steele, the right tackle, who's been struggling this season, only has a 50.1 overall offensive grade. And he has not done well in run protection at all with the 47.5 run blocking grade. So that's definitely a matchup that you want to see Myles Garrett take advantage of. Again, has a lesser offensive tackle to go against. Last week was dealing with a hampered Morgan Moses. And this week, Terence still obviously has been struggling this season, and we want to see Myles Garrett to continue to build and take advantage of a weaker offensive tackle matchup. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, now this defense has struggled, and you can't really keep it any more simpler than that. The front four hasn't generated pressure in the way that you would expect them to, especially for how much money is on that defensive line. Look at DeMarcus Lawrence, who they gave $100 million to. He only has 1 sack this season, and he's also struggling with a knee injury. He's currently graded at a 63.7, so there's still some questions about really that big playmaking ability that you want to see from him. Across from him, you have Tyron Crawford. Now, with this defense, they run more of a hybrid 4-3. So you'll expect Crawford sometimes line up in the defensive end. He'll also slide into the interior and play at the defensive tackle position. He hasn't graded that well this season. Has relatively struggled on the defensive line. He has only a 48.3 overall defensive grade. But then you rotate over and you look at Everson Griffin. Everson Griffin also hasn't had that production that you're expecting out of him. Obviously, he's performed really well for the Minnesota Vikings, but now is playing for the Dallas Cowboys. He's only graded at a 49.2 overall defensive grade, but he's still a player that can get to the quarterback, create some QB pressure, and also get to the quarterback in terms of collapsing the pocket. So that's going to be huge for both Jedrick Wheels and Jack Conklin, as they're going to have that continuous rotation at the defensive end position, and really more of an edge position group for the Dallas Cowboys. Sliding over to the interior, you look at Dontari Poe and Tristan Hill. Dontari Poe, obviously for the Kansas City Chiefs, has had a very consistent career in terms of what you can expect from him. He's grading relatively below average right now with the 55.6 grade, both in run and defensive pass rush. And you look at Tristan Hill. Now, my biggest issue with Tristan Hill is his dirty play of last week, where he pulled a gator roll, essentially where he had the leg of Chris Carson and then rolled over the leg, which caused a knee sprain. He was out for the game. Something that players don't like to see in this league. Former offensive tackle Jeff Schwartz actually commented on that move by him on Twitter, saying that could be an issue. And just a lot of plays by him. He was coming in late, tackling players either out of bounds or diving on piles late. So obviously we want to kind of watch out for the dirty play of Tristan Hill. And he's already been fined for unnecessary roughness. And again, fined for the gator roll tackle that had in Chris Carson just last week. So we definitely want to look at that. And we want some good protection from Joe Betonio, J.C. Treader, and Wyatt Teller on the interior. They're backed up by Antoine Woods and Neville Gallimore. Looking at the linebacker position, you have Jalen Smith at the wheel, the weak side linebacker, backed up by Justin March. Now, Jalen Smith has actually struggled this season, mostly in coverage. He has a 38.7 coverage grade and hasn't performed that well. But also on the same token, he doesn't have that same linebacking group of Sean Lee and Leighton Vander Esch, who's out on short-term IR, so they won't be playing this week. And then you look at the replacement for Leighton Vander Esch with Joe Thomas, not the legendary Browns offensive tackle Joe Thomas, but Joe Thomas of the Dallas Cowboys linebacker. He's grading with a 62.8 for the 20th highest rated linebacker in the league right now. And he does really well in run defense with a 71.9 run defensive grade. And then you look at Alden Smith. Alden Smith is the biggest X factor for this Cowboys defense. Currently has leading the NFL with 4.5 sacks. He had 3.5 just last week. So obviously that's a huge gain. Him being reinstated by Roger Goodell this offseason. He's potentially in the running for comeback player of the year if he can keep up, obviously that performance. But obviously we're hoping that he can limit himself this week going against the Cleveland Browns. He's currently graded at a 65.5 and has a above average 72.1 pass rushing grade. So obviously he can get to the quarterback. And he even showed during his time when he was on the San Francisco 49ers that he has that pass rushing productivity. And they also have a chance of getting back some more edge rushers as well. Now, going back to the secondary, you look at Trayvon Diggs, again, who's listening to this questionable heading into this game. He's backed up by C.J. Goodwin, Jordan Lewis, Darryl Royley, and Anthony Brown. The Dallas Cowboys secondary has struggled so far this season, so they're still trying to find some consistency. So they actually go relatively deep into their depth chart, which is something that they'll continue to do. Obviously, they're trying to figure out what works in that secondary, but they just haven't been able to figure it out completely. And that's really why the Dallas Cowboys secondary has struggled. And we're hoping, obviously being Browns fans, for us that are Browns fans, we want to see them continue to have those miscommunications. That was something that I noticed watching the game film from the last few weeks, is that there was constantly plays where players are open behind the defense, whether it be Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf or Calvin Ridley. A lot of players were open down the field off of play action, which is huge for the Browns because Baker Mayfield performs his best escaping the pocket, rolling out, or bootlegs off of play action. And there was a lot of miscommunications on the back end, and the Browns could definitely take advantage of that using that play action, which is first going to be established by running the ball. Then you look at the rest of their Cowboys secondary. You have Xavier Woods, who's one of the better safeties in the league at free safety. He's actually the sixth highest rated safety in the league right now with the 75.9 grade. He's grading well in coverage with the 73.7. He's backed up by Brandon Carr. Obviously, Brandon Carr has been with the Cowboys for a while now, playing that cornerback, moving back to safety. He's going to be that backup option at the free safety position. Then they have Darlin Thomas, their box safety, who's currently grading relatively average with the 50.4 grade. He's backed up by Donovan Wilson and Reggie Robinson II. Now, we want to see the Browns continue to improve on their performances of the last few weeks. And one of the bigger questions when it comes to the team is, what can they provide in terms of the offense? Because there's some questions regarding Baker Mayfield and his ability to push the ball down the field or really just get a lot of passing yards. Looking at the offense that Kevin Stefanski wants to run, you're going to expect a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends on the field. Obviously, they're going to have Kader Hodge come in and be that third receiver, that run blocking receiver, to continue to pound the ball. They want to run the ball as much as possible. And the discipline of Kevin Stefanski is huge for this Browns team because they understand that the run game is the feature of this offense. And they want to allow Nick Chubb to be that bell cow and for Kareem Hunt to spell him as much as possible and limit really how many passes Baker Mayfield has to throw. Now, that's not a knock on what Baker Mayfield can do as a quarterback. I still believe that Baker Mayfield has the talent and can showcase that he can be the franchise quarterback to turn this team around. But the team hasn't really faced a situation since really week 1 where Baker Mayfield has to throw the ball a lot. Now, if this team gets down early and quickly, you could see potentially a repeat from week 1 where they kind of got away from the run game early. But that's not necessarily something you want to see. You want to see them to maintain that run game and maintain running the ball as much as possible in a way that it's still efficient and allow Baker Mayfield to trust his eyes and really make the smart plays down the field. Looking at the defensive scheme for the Browns, continue to run that 4-3 under, where you have a rotation of either Michael Smith or Mack Wilson, and then they like to bring in a lot of nickel back. So Kevin Johnson will be on the field more times than not when you see Sione Takitaki come off the field off that 4-3 base defense. Looking at the Dallas Cowboys and their scheme, they run a gun spread offense. Essentially, Dak Prescott is going to be taking passes out of the shotgun with Ezekiel Elliott lined up on the left or right side of him. And then 11 personnel, they have 3 receivers on the field with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb for majority of their snaps. And then their defensive scheme, they run more of a 4-3 base/hybrid. Now, the reason why I say hybrid is because Alden Smith is more of a pass rushing linebacker off the edge. So those might be situations where you see Tyron Crawford slide into the inside and play at the interior, and then Alden Smith come rushing off the edge. And then again, for their base, they also have DeMarcus Lawrence and Everson Griffin. So you can expect a lot of different matchups along the defensive line and whoever those edge defenders are. Now, looking at matchups to watch, the Browns defensive backs and the Cowboys receivers. Amari Cooper, Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb. I know you've been hearing those names a lot because those are the 3 players that the Browns really have to contain this week. I don't really feel like they're going to stop Amari Cooper. He's obviously struggled on the road in previous seasons being with the Cowboys, but at home, Amari Cooper is one of the better receivers in the league, and that's really scary about this matchup, especially considering that Denzel Ward is nursing that groin injury still. Then you look at Terence Mitchell going against Michael Gallup. Terence Mitchell has been playing relatively well in the absence of Greedy Williams, and you want to see him to continue to improve among that performance, which is going to be big. Michael Gallup has the ability to disrupt the game. Obviously, last week he had a huge game with over 100 yards receiving and a touchdown. And you hope that Terence Mitchell can continue to have veteran savvy play that he showcased throughout the season thus far. And then again, Kevin Johnson versus CeeDee Lamb will probably be the biggest matchup of all the Browns DBs and Cowboys receivers for this game. Now, another matchup to watch will definitely be Dak Prescott versus the Browns linebackers. Now, with this, I say it's more of a chess game because it's the legs of Dak Prescott that the Browns want to contain, because he has shown the ability to escape out of the pocket and scramble for a first down. And a 2-3 yard scramble can make the difference between a drive resulting in points or a drive ending early and having to punt the ball. And we have a mobile QB that can get out of the pocket. That definitely adds another threat to the offense, rather be in the red zone where he sees an open lane and he can run for a touchdown, or when they're on the goal line with those QB sneaks, which has got him 3 rushing touchdowns on the season already. And then lastly, the Browns tight ends versus the Cowboys edge players. They have a big rotation with Alden Smith, DeMarcus Lawrence, Everson Griffin, Tyron Crawford. A lot of players are continuing to rotate around that Cowboys edge, having that 4-3 hybrid defense. So obviously, Austin Hooper, Harrison Bryant, and Stephen Carlson, it's going to be a big game for them in terms of selling that edge. And then also in pass protection with Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wheels being able to maintain the pockets and give Baker Mayfield a clean pocket against that edge defenders of the Cowboys front four. Now, again, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is brought to you by Sports Illustrated Browns Digest. I am a contributing writer giving weekly articles over on Sports Illustrated Browns Digest, which is led by lead editor Pete Smith and contributing writer Brandon Little. You can go ahead and check it out at www.si.com/NFL/Browns. Again, that's Sports Illustrated Browns Digest. You can check us out, daily articles. There's also going to be a live game day thread, which is updated throughout the game. You can join myself, Pete Smith, and Brandon Little in the thread over on the website. You guys can check that out. So we're going to go ahead and get into the Who You Got series of the show. Looking at the quarterback, obviously Baker Mayfield, 16 for 23 for the second week in a row, only threw for 156 yards, but had 2 touchdowns and a 117.3 total QBR. That's raw, not adjusted. And Baker Mayfield has played well this season since week 1. Obviously, there's still some passes that are questionable where there could be turnover-worthy throws, which is big. And this may be that game where Mayfield has to throw the ball 30-plus times. Now, he hasn't done that since week 1, and obviously the Browns' offense didn't perform well at all in week 1 against the Baltimore Ravens. They got down early, and the offense just couldn't really get the ball rolling, and the defense struggled as well. But, again, Mayfield is in that situation where he could potentially be facing a shootout and could be throwing the ball a lot. And if that does end up being the case, this could be a marquee game for Mayfield in terms of this is what I can do as your franchise quarterback and have that 300-yard game that he hasn't had in a while, or really sparked us like he did back in his rookie season when he first started. Then you look at Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is number 1 rated quarterback right now. Last week, he threw for 472 yards, which is huge. In his last 2 games, he's thrown for over 922 yards. Baker Mayfield hasn't thrown over 250, in his last 2 weeks. So that's obviously something to look at, that Dak Prescott has thrown the ball a lot, while also on the same token, throwing the ball a lot hasn't led to too many wins. Obviously, they won the game against the Atlanta Falcons, but that was on a botched onside kick by the Falcons, where they pretty much lost that game. And Dak Prescott had 450 yards that game. So he's shown ability to be turnover prone in the league. He's already thrown 2 interceptions last week. He's fumbled the ball at least once in the last 2 games. So he's shown ability to be turnover prone in situations. He threw a game-sealing interception last week against the Seahawks. And if the Browns can build upon the success that they had last week against Dwayne Haskins in Washington and actually create some turnovers, this can keep the Browns in the game. Now, a lot of people feel like the Cowboys are very talented and the Browns really don't have a lot of opportunities to win this game. You look at the Cleveland Browns beat reporters, none of them in their score predictions had the Browns winning this game because of the offensive power that Dak Prescott brings. But I believe if you can take advantage of those turnovers, which he's shown he can turn the ball over, whether it be an interception or a fumble, that gives the Browns more opportunities on offense. And last week, on every interception they had against Washington, the Browns defense, when they created an interception, the Browns often scored a touchdown. And touchdown versus 3 points on turnovers are huge, and those can be the things that turn the tide of the game. So I'm still going to have to give this who you got to Dak Prescott because he's the best quarterback right now. But that's a key for the Browns, is to get some turnovers, which could help turn the tide of this game. Now, moving over to the running backs, this who you got, before I even get fully into the comparison, I'm going to give this one to the Browns because they have the best running back duo in the NFL. You look at Nick Chubb last week, 19 carries, 108 yards for 2 touchdowns. He was averaging 5.7 yards per carry. That's huge for this offense. Nick Chubb and his success on the ground really is what determines the success for the Cleveland Browns offense as a whole. Because when you can run the ball successfully, it opens up, one, the passing game, and it also opens up the play action. When you have good play action passing on offense, that opens up things down the field. Baker Mayfield performs well in run pass option and play action passing. And if Nick Chubb can run the ball with success early and often, that definitely helps with sustaining drives and controlling the time of possession. And this is a key for teams that score a lot of points quickly. Controlling the time of possession is very important in terms of having success later on in the game, because it gives the number one offense, which is the Cowboys at this point, less opportunities on the field. And then obviously creating turnovers on defense gives them less opportunities to score points as well. Then you look at Kareem Hunt last week with 16 carries, only had 46 yards, but he had a receiving touchdown where he motioned out of the backfield to the near sideline, ran a hitch route, and scored a touchdown. He's nursing that groin injury, but I still believe the talent that he has is something that can't be replaced easy by any team in the league. And again, they have the number one 1-2 punch in the league with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Now, on the flip side, you look at Ezekiel Elliott, who's obviously a top 3 running back in the NFL, but it also comes down to depth. Last week, he only had 34 yards on 14 carries for a 2.4 yards per carry average. On the same token, he had 11 targets out of the backfield. So Dak Prescott's obviously dunking the ball off to him in situations where nothing's open vertically. He finds Ezekiel Elliott out of the backfield for checkdowns, but he only had about 20 yards and some change on those 11 targets. So he's getting touches, but it's been kind of wishy-washy on, is it going to be on the ground, or is he going to make big plays out of the backfield catching the ball? When you look back at week 1, he had that pass that he caught out on the right flat, made 4 defenders miss against the LA Rams, and then dove for a touchdown. He has the ability to make plays out of the backfield, either running the ball or catching passes out of the backfield, but it's been kind of inconsistent in terms of his production. You know, if he has a big game, you can see him run for 100 yards, because once he gets going, they're going to continue to feed him. But on the same token, you get a few runs where 1 yard, 2 yards, no yards, a couple tackles for losses, and then you start to notice that they get away from the run quickly. So if this Browns defensive line can continue to improve and stay strong against the run game, you could see Ezekiel Elliott have one of those non-marquee games that you expect him to have. And then Tony Pollard, who's the second running back, he's only had 3 carries all this season and doesn't get on the field that much. So obviously you have to give it to the deeper running back group with the number 1 and number 2 punch of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Moving over to the receivers, this one is tough, but obviously you got to give it to the Dallas Cowboys. But first, let's look at the Cleveland Browns and their receivers. You look at Jarvis Landry, who caught all 4 of his targets last week, but only for 36 yards, but he has a 70.3 receiving grade. Jarvis Landry has been the most short-handed receiver on this team for pretty much the time that he's been with the organization. He's a leader. He keeps Odell Beckham level-headed, which is big because obviously his personality could be very spry and very dynamic to the team when his personality isn't meshing with the overall look of what you want for the Browns on game day. Now you look at Odell Beckham last week, he had 6 targets. He caught 4 receptions for 59 yards. He didn't score a touchdown, but he had huge third down conversions. And that's what you expect for Odell Beckham. When he doesn't have that huge game where he has over 100 yards or 2 touchdowns or that huge gain down the field, you want him to find open spaces on third down for those big third and long conversions that keep drives going. And you want to see that excitement, that fire, and that passion that he showed last week. Even though he didn't score a touchdown, he still had big third down conversions, and you want to see him continue to build upon that. And then obviously they have Kader Hodge, who is the highest run blocking receiver on the team. But again, I have to give this who you got to the Dallas Cowboys, who has arguably one of the best receiving groups, if not the best receiving group in the NFL. Last week, you look at Amari Cooper, had 12 targets, 9 receptions for 86 yards, and always is a threat down the field. Great route runner. Obviously, sometimes can be shaky with his hands, but really that's been more on the road. In Dallas, the man plays out of his mind. So that's something we have to look at. He's currently graded at a 73.9 for the 25th highest overall for receivers. And you look at Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup is a player at that X receiver who can really take over a game, which he did last week. On 9 targets, had 6 receptions for 138 yards and a touchdown. He's another player that when he gets going, he plays relatively well, and he wins a lot of those contested catches, high-pointed passes outside the numbers down the field, which the Dallas Cowboys offense throws a lot. And then you look at CeeDee Lamb, who's continued to grow in his role as that slot receiver, and currently he has a 66.1 grade, but each week he's around 70, 80 yards, and he may have the ability to continue to grow upon that, in that role in the slot where typically that nickel corner is someone that's smaller. And CeeDee Lamb's around 6'1", so he's actually bigger coming out of the slot, so he can run block. But on the same token, his route running is really good, and he's actually one of the better slot receivers that came out of college this year. So this one I'm going to have to give to the Dallas Cowboys and have an advantage in terms of their receiver group. Now looking at the tight ends, with the Cleveland Browns, I believe they do have the stronger tight end group of the two. You look at Austin Hooper, he only has 3 receptions for 25 yards on 4 targets, but he's at least seeing an increased target share on a weekly basis, which is important. And we don't really know when he's going to have that big game where he scores a couple touchdowns. Hopefully, this week when the team gets into the red zone, he can, find some soft spots in the zone or get open on a pay action pass. Obviously, Harrison Bryant was able to get open on the goal line for a touchdown last week. I want to see him continue to improve. Austin Hooper, on the flip side, is a very good run blocker at the tight end position. And again, the matchup to watch, the Browns tight ends versus the edge defenders of the Cowboys. He's currently graded at a 72.8 with his run blocking grade according to Pro Football Focus. You want to see him continue to excel in run blocking. Compared to the Dallas Cowboys, who's already lost Blake Jarwin, Dalton Schultz, on the flip side, again, actually is graded higher in run blocking grade to Austin Hooper. He has a 73.9, and he actually gets his fair share of targets. Last week, he had 6 targets for 4 receptions for 48 yards. But again, they just don't have that backing in that tight end group for the Dallas Cowboys, only having Blake Bell and Sean McKinnon, who's a rookie. So there's still a lot of questions regarding that that Cowboys tight end group. So I have to give the position group benefit to the Browns and their offense. Now, again, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is sponsored by Focus Clothing. Focus Clothing is a Cleveland-based clothing company, Black-owned business as well. You guys can check them out. Focus Clothing is more than a brand. They have daily motivation and just different types of content on their social media. You can follow them at Focus Clothing CLE on Facebook and Instagram, or follow them on Twitter at Focus CLE. And again, Cleveland-based clothing company.
Who said that t-shirt was only for the summer? Remix.
Again, Focus Clothing, a Cleveland-based clothing company. You guys can check them out at focusclothingcle.com. Now, looking over at the offensive line groups, the offensive line for the Cleveland Browns has continued to improve more and more, and this is another one. Typically, in the situations, you will look at the Dallas Cowboys, and they've been a team that has had strong offensive lines, but they've also been struggling this year, especially due to injury at the tackle position. So this one I'm going to give to the Cleveland Browns. You look at Wyatt Teller, who has been grading extremely well at their right guard position. Joe Betonio, you have the two of the top 5 highest offensive graded Pro Football Focus guards in the NFL right now. J.C. Treader, top 3 graded center. And then you look at Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wheels, who have been grading better and better each week as they've gotten healthier and continue to build that chemistry. And you expect them to build upon that success at the offensive line. Then you look at the Dallas Cowboys. Again, they've struggled because of injury. Connor Williams have been playing okay this season. Joe Looney kind of playing above average this season. Zack Martin, who's been that all-pro guard, isn't playing up to that all-pro standard that he's set, but he's been the most consistent of all players along that Dallas Cowboy offensive line. Then you look at Tyron Smith, the left tackle, who protects Dak Prescott's blind side. He's been dealing with injuries this season, so there's still some question marks around his health going into this game and how much play will Brandon Knight get. Then on the flip side, you look at Terence Steele at the right tackle position, where they're missing Lael Collins and Cameron Irving, the former Brown. Terence Steele has performed well this season, and he's been struggling, and you expect Porter Goodson or Myles Garrett to take advantage of that opportunity at the right tackle position. And then hopefully, Olivier Vernon, whatever capacity he plays this week, that he can do something against Tyron Smith, who isn't healthy himself. So this one I have to give to the Browns and their offensive line. One, they're healthy, they're getting healthier, and they're just building chemistry, and they're playing well so far this season. Moving over to the defensive line, keep it on the DL. You look at the Cleveland Browns and their defensive line group. I still believe the Cleveland Browns have one of the stronger front fours in the entire NFL. Myles Garrett, the #1 rated pass rushing defensive end in terms of pass rushing productivity. He's the 3rd highest overall edge defender. And there's still some questions regarding Olivier Vernon and what he can offer in terms of his health. But he's been a veteran that has potential, but again, just injuries have been hampering him. And you just want him to be healthy in that role, playing across from Myles Garrett. Porter Goodson, again, has had the most snaps behind Myles Garrett at that opposite defensive end position. And he's a player that performs well in pass rush, having a 64.6 pass rushing grade according to PFF, and you just want him to see him to continue to improve, and he's backed up by Joe Jackson. Now, hopefully they can continue to improve because it's a very tough matchup for them. Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi and Jordan Elliott have all performed well in terms of their run defense productivity, but can they provide a little bit more in terms of creating pressure up the middle against this Dallas Cowboys offense, which has struggled so far this season? That's going to be big for them. And I feel if they can get interior up the middle, that could cause Dak Prescott to either hold the ball a little bit longer for those edge players to get in, or just help out the secondary in coverage so he's not getting the ball out as quickly. Force him to get out the pocket maybe a little bit, or just move around the pocket to hold the ball just a little bit longer. And that interior pass rush by Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi could be a determining factor for that success. Comparing that to the Dallas Cowboys defensive line, running that hybrid 4-3, they're a team that have a lot of veterans across the defensive line, but they still have a lot of questions in terms of what are you going to get in terms of production. DeMarcus Lawrence, again, has a $100 million contract, but only has 1 sack on the season. Alden Smith, who's more of a linebacker, but still plays that edge position, he's someone that offers a lot, having 4.5 sacks leading in the NFL so far this season. Tyron Crawford, Everson Griffin, again, a bigger rotation of defensive ends that they can rely on. And you have Don Terry Poe and Tristan Hill, who's been the starting defensive tackles for this team, and they have a consistent rotation. Now, the first 2 weeks of the season, they didn't play that well, but they're beginning to improve in terms of their pass rushing productivity and getting to the quarterback, and something that they want to continue to build upon. And then it's just something for them to continue to improve in terms of getting their pass rushing productivity, which will help out that defense, but it's still a big question mark. So I have to give this who you got on the DL to the Browns defensive line group led by Myles Garrett. Moving over to the linebackers, you look at Cleveland Browns. Their linebacking core obviously isn't the strongest. You still have some questions regarding what B.J. Goodson can do in coverage. Was last week just a fluke? Did they take advantage of Dwayne Haskins, who's really just been staring down receivers, which led to a lot of his interceptions? You hope that B.J. Goodson can improve in coverage and really his run defense up the middle. But again, you have Sione Takitaki, that strong-sided Sam linebacker who's performed well in run defense. And then you have Mack Wilson and Malcolm Smith, those more coverage-oriented linebackers you want to see continue to excel, rather than being covering a tight end, Dalton Schultz, or covering the intermediate parts in a softer zone defense, because I expect Joe Woods to really play back and keep a lot of the plays for the Dallas Cowboys offense in front of that Browns defense to prevent them from getting deep into the secondary in that backfield. So obviously you want to see the Browns linebacking core improve and play a little bit better. Now there's some questions regarding the defensive linebacking core for the Cowboys. You look at Jalen Smith, who's been performing relatively below average. They've already lost Leighton Vander Esch, and then you also lose Sean Lee, both to IR. There's some questions, what does Joe Thomas provide in terms of consistency? Can he be consistent in coverage? Obviously, he performs well in run defense, but there's questions about what he can do in totality in the middle of that defense. And obviously, Alden Smith is a player that's more of an edge defender, playing that weak side strong side linebacker position, but it's more of a 4-3 hybrid, more like a 4-2 as they bring in a nickel back. So this group, I feel more confident with the Browns linebacking core, even though the linebacking core for the Browns still has some questions. They just still have a group that I believe can find success this week. But again, it needs to see improvement from that linebacking group in terms of their coverage grade. Moving over to the secondary, cornerback play is huge for the Browns, and we definitely need to see improvement. You look at Denzel Ward and Terence Mitchell, they both grade relatively well at a 70.2 grade, tied for 13th among all cornerbacks according to PFF. And they've been playing well on the outside. Kevin Johnson at the nickelback position has played well, and I feel confident about that group. Kevin Johnson's graded at a 78.2. Obviously, has only played 37 snaps, but he's a player that will continue to improve on a week basis as he gets stronger, and gets closer to midseason form after sitting out majority of training camp with that lacerated liver. This matchup of Denzel Ward, Terence Mitchell, and Kevin Johnson is going to be huge for this game, and I feel confident about the cornerback group as a whole. Rather, they activate A.J. Green. You have MJ Stewart and Tavier Thomas to back up the nickelback position in the slot. Rather, they come in for dime packages. They have 4 defensive backs or 4 cornerbacks on the field. But you just want to see them perform stronger, in this matchup with the Dallas Cowboys and the receiver group that they have. Then you look at the Cowboys and what they have in terms of their corners. There's still a lot of questions. Obviously, they've already lost Awuzie to IR, and then Trayvon Diggs is questionable this week. But as a number one corner, Trayvon Diggs hasn't performed that well. And then you have Jordan Lewis, Darrell Woolley, and Anthony Brown, players that they're constantly rotating in to figure out which group performs the best, but they still have question marks in that secondary. Jordan Lewis is graded at 54.9 overall defensive grade, which is only 66 among corners. Darrell Woolley has a 60.2 coverage grade. And then Anthony Brown, which has the worst coverage grade of them all, has a 48.6 of the cornerbacks that's not starting. But again, they just have too many questions around that secondary group. And can Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry take advantage, of that weakened cornerback group in a situation that Baker Mayfield has to throw the ball 30 times this game? So this group, I feel, is stronger for the Cleveland Browns and their cornerback group. But as a secondary as a whole, I feel slightly more confident in terms of the safeties that the Cowboys have compared to the Browns. Obviously, Andrew Sendejo has struggled so far this season at that free safety position. We haven't seen much at all. Sheldrick Redwine on defense. Mostly has been a special teams player. Will he get a little bit more play this week? We'll still have to wait and see. Andrew Sendejo has a 53.5 coverage grade, but again, there's still questions regarding him and what consistency can he provide on the back end? If he has blown coverages against this Cowboys receiver group, that's going to be some big touchdowns, and you're already going against the number 1 rated offense that can put up points. So it's going to be huge that he's in the right positions, making plays smartly on the back end of that defense and not allowing anything behind him and being that safety net on the back end. And then you have Carl Joseph, who's more of a box safety at that strong safety position. He has graded well in run defense with the 64.3 run defensive grade, but you want to see a little bit more from him. And then hopefully this week you can get a little bit more snap count in the situation that they want to play a little bit more big nickel with 3 safeties on the field with Ronnie Harrison in order to limit some of that run game if Ezekiel Elliott has some success early. Flipping over to the Dallas Cowboys and their safety group, you look at Xavier Woods, who's the 6th highest rated safety in the league right now with a 73.7 coverage grade. Xavier Woods has always been relatively well performing in terms of secondary play. He has a 75.9 overall grade. He's a stalwart in the back of that defense in terms of pass protection. So it'll be interesting to see how many shots Baker Mayfield decides to take against Xavier Woods. And he's kind of ball hawky as well. So hopefully that doesn't result in an interception for Baker Mayfield. And then at the strong safety, they have Darlin Thompson, who's only graded below average with the 50.4 overall grade. He's been graded average in terms of both run and coverage defense. But on the same token, he has Xavier Woods, who plays well at that deep safety role. So I just, again, feel a little bit more confident with the Dallas Cowboys in terms of their safeties. But the secondary group as a whole, I believe the Browns have a little bit more consistency, and obviously we're going to have to see that consistency this week with a big passing attack for the Dallas Cowboys and their offense. And then you look lastly at the special teams. Special teams is huge for, I would say, the Browns this week, just because there's a lot of questions of what will you really get from them. Can they continue to improve on a level that will help the team play well? That's still to be seen. But, if they can play at a high level in terms of special teams and limit what the Cowboys can do, say in a situation on kickoffs or punts where you can pin the Dallas Cowboys inside their own 15, on their own 10, or limit, big returns on kickoffs and force the Cowboys to have long drives where they're starting at the 20, the 15. That makes the Cowboys have to sustain drives for a longer period of time, which is hard to do, through 4 quarters. And that's going to come a lot to Cody Parker and especially Jamie Gillen, the Scottish Hammer, the punter, when the Browns do punt, which they will, to pin them inside the red zone and inside their own 10, which could be huge and especially help that Browns defense in terms of keeping things in front of them and not allowing, big explosive plays down the field. Now, there's some questions regarding the kickoff and return units with JoJo Natson being out with a torn ACL for the rest of the season. Donovan Peoples-Jones is likely going to take over for the main kickoff return duties. And then Dearness Johnson is going to be that punt returner, and replace for him. But again, you just hope that we can find some consistency. JoJo Natson obviously offered a lot of speed, but didn't really show too many explosive plays in the return game. So hopefully Donovan Peoples-Jones and Dearness Johnson can provide a spark in terms of the special teams. Then you look on the flip side, the special teams for the Dallas Cowboys. Chris Jones is a solid punter. Greg Zuerlein is one of those players that's kind of mixed bag. He can punt or kick a ball and knock it off the goalpost, but he also can hit a 55 or 60-yard field goal when healthy. So he's already won the game against the Atlanta Falcons and performed relatively decent against the Seahawks, but there's still that question of consistency. May he miss an extra point that causes the Cowboys to have to go for 2, or misses a field goal, which can keep the Browns in the game. Things like that could really pay big dividends for the Browns if Greg Zuerlein isn't as accurate as he's shown in the past. And then also with the return units. Their main kick returner is going to be Tony Pollard, with their punt returner being CeeDee Lamb. Now, CeeDee Lamb, even going back to college at Oklahoma, showed a lot of potential as a punt returner. He's very agile and athletic in the open space and can make players miss. So it's going to be huge that Mike Prefer and his special teams unit, especially coverage units, play well. There's going to be looking a lot at the gunners, which is going to be Kader Hodge and Xavier Thomas, for them to perform well in those coverage units. Personally, I feel a little bit more confident this week about the Browns in terms of Cody Parker and Jamie Gillan, just because Cody Parker's been so consistent, making all his field goals, making all his extra points, and continue to build upon that success. Jamie Gillan, obviously has a huge leg, and he can take advantage, of different fielding positions in terms of pinning the Cowboys within the 10 or 15-yard line, and it's going to be huge for them to continue to perform well. Now, again, I just want to thank you guys so much for joining me for the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. The Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is not directly attributed to the Cleveland Browns or the NFL. This is strictly for creative comments and thought and attributions. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. Whether you be on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook, or you're on the website, YouTube, leave a comment. This is a time where I like to talk about the comments that you guys leave, whether it be a score prediction or what you believe may happen. Go ahead and leave those comments, and I'll be addressing them basically for the last 10 minutes that we have remaining for the show. Now, going back to the show template, we have, the 3 keys for the game, which is going to be huge. One key for this game is going to be discipline by Kevin Stefanski. Now, I know this sounds weird, where we've seen when the team has been up that he continues to run the ball, but discipline is running the ball when the team is down. The team did not perform well week 1 when they got away from the run too early against the Baltimore Ravens, and the passing attack just really couldn't get together. In a situation that does become a shootout, obviously they're going to have to throw the ball. But if you can keep the score close and run the ball, that's going to be huge in terms of the success that the offense will likely see this game. The next thing, control the time of possession. If the Browns can control the time of possession, it gives them a better chance of winning this game, because we all know the Dallas Cowboys offense can put up a lot of points. And if we can limit how many points they can score, or limit the opportunities that they're on the field, that one keeps the defense fresh. And obviously a tired defense becomes more susceptible to big plays down the field, miscommunications, just big plays that can result in scored points for the opposition. And if the Browns can continue to run the ball, maintain that time of possession, maintain drives and long drives, I believe that can definitely help in terms of the Browns playing well this game. And then the biggest key, I feel, really to this game, outside of running the ball and controlling the time of possession, is the defense stepping up. And I mean the defense as a whole. You're going up against the number 1 offense in the NFL. There's no time for mistakes. There can't be miscommunications on the back end, Andrew Sendejo. There can't be miscommunications in zone coverage. Players can't be running open in the middle and intermediate parts of the field. If they can maintain those things and play well, then it again provides the offense more opportunities, because it's going to be important that the Browns score points this week. If they can do that, then there's a strong chance, that they can win this game. Now, just look at some of the comments on the game. What's my final score prediction? So a lot of Browns beats writers don't have the Browns winning in this game. They expect the Cowboys to score 30-plus points. Some even have 40. A lot of people expect this to be a shootout, but something's just telling me that the Dallas Cowboys offense is going to come back to earth in some sort. Now, they can still put up points, obviously. I'm not expecting them to score 10 points, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't score 30. They only scored 17 in the first 2 weeks. And the last 2 weeks that they've played, they've turned the ball over a lot. You look at the Atlanta Falcons, they fumbled the ball 3 times in the first quarter, so the Falcons got up early, and their defense kind of played lackadaisical, and that's how they scored so many points. You look at last week in Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson scored 5 touchdowns, would have been 6 if DK Metcalf didn't fumble the ball on the goal line, so they were up, so they were throwing the ball a lot. in a close game where you're not, up or down, or if you're not down a lot of points, you don't feel the need to throw the ball when you have Ezekiel Elliott, if he's running successfully. So I actually believe this to be a lot closer in terms of score than, some of the beat writers expect. So I'm actually looking for the Browns to win this one 28-27. So it's in order for the Browns to win this game, they need to keep it close. So 4 touchdowns versus potentially 4 touchdowns from the Cowboys, but either a missed extra point or they have 2 field goals. So 28-27 for me. The Browns keep it close. They control the time of possession. They pound the ball, and they have a huge chance of winning this game. So I want to thank you guys again for joining me for the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. Again, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is sponsored by Focus Clothing. Focus Clothing is a Cleveland-based clothing business, Black-owned business in Cleveland. Go ahead and check them out at focusclothingcle.com/shop. Also, make sure you guys go ahead and check out the website, www.si.com/NFL/Browns. There's a live game thread up on the website right now where you guys can stay tuned with me, Pete Smith, and Brandon Little throughout the game. Leave your comments, leave your thoughts. Go ahead and share out the post. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you during the game thread. See you next week, and I'll see you later. Peace.